tells them to go online, and then the next activity, chapter 7, is how to interpret the data. Is try to get them better connect what they saw outside to what the actual measurements are that they're seeing, on the map on the website. So it's kind of what we just did, kind of discussing some of the sessions, understanding, what the PM actually means, things like that. So again, it's kidsmakingsense.org, and you can click on maps that takes you to this section. All that is in here, so you don't have to remember that today. But it's good, so, once they go out there, not only is it important, I walked over to this area and I saw this, or I walked over here. If they're just walking around outside, the wind patterns, the weather that they're seeing can affect particulate measurements that they're going to get. So we already talked a little bit about this, about how, I said a little bit about humidity and smoke and all those other things. But so each one of these kind of weather factors can affect particulate matter and the concentrations that we're going to see in different ways. So, if it's a windy day, we've got a lot of high winds, that could help transport pollution, but it also might make it so that it's transporting so far you're not getting it's clearing out the air at the same time, right? Whereas if you have a low wind day, kind of a stagnation event, you're likely to see increased particles because the air isn't kind of passing through as much. So, windy days versus not windy days are really interesting things that we can look at.
Unless you live in Oxnard, where
it's windy all the time.
Field.
Well, there's that too. So understanding the concept of upwind and downwind is really significant, right? So if the wind's blowing from the ocean, if you're right next to it, you're probably going to get clean air. But if you're then on the other side of town after it's passed through everything, or downwind of the, ag field or the airport or anything like that, you're going to see probably some different concentrations there as well. So understanding that temperature can have an effect on particulate matter that we see. If it's a hot day outside, you got a lot of sources of VOCs or something like that. Gases and things can evaporate off in higher temperatures, and that can lead to, speed up the reactions that make particulate matter happen. So you might, on a hot day, see a little bit more particulate matter as well. Similarly, or I should say on the other end of that, if it's cold outside, winter time is coming up, we tend to get, I guess you'll see it a lot overnight too. You build up the boundary layer, kind of stays low to the ground, takes a while for it to burn off. And in that colder temperature, a lot of the pollution from the surface gets kind of trapped there. It's not expanding yet, right? If you think of the boundary layer as kind of the bit of air that's closest to the surface, if it's cold, it all compresses down. So everything that was in that boundary layer is staying right there. As the day warms up, you kind of get to expand that volume a little bit more, and it clears out some of the pollution that way too. But there are temperature events, things like inversions, that can cause, pollution to get trapped on the surface. Normally, as you go up in the air, it gets colder, the temperature, but we can have these weather events called inversions where you get a little bit of cold air trapped underneath a pocket of warm air before it gets cold again, and that causes really interesting stagnation events that can happen, increased pollution as well. That tends to happen a lot. We see it a lot in the Bay Area, see it in parts of the Central Valley.
San Fernando Valley.
Yeah, valleys and things like that.
Valley, Ojai.
So.
Yes. Anywhere in bowl.
Yeah, exactly. Anywhere in a kind of a bowl situation. I mean, some of the worst air quality in places in the world are going to be places where it's a valley. I think one of the
Mexico City,
Ulaanbaatar, capital of Mongolia. Some of the worst air quality. It's a really steep valley. They have a lot of cook stove emissions and other things like that, and everything just gets trapped right there. So it makes the Central Valley kind of our worst air quality area in the nation as well for the U.S. Bakersfield, some of the worst air quality ever. Sorry if anybody's from Bakersfield.
Thames River Valley in England, it was one of the first where we identified deaths resulting from inversion conditions in 1952.
Yeah, the Great Smog Event in 1952.
Yeah.
Anybody watches The Crown on Netflix? There's a whole episode on. I got really excited about that. The geek in me was like, "Oh, they're doing an air quality episode." Not only focused on that, but it was about 1952 was the first really big event where we kind of understood this a little bit more.
And the only reason we knew that was that the British government was so careful in keeping hospital records. They kept wonderful hospital records, and so the association between the very deep fog, which was from a lot of peat fires in homes, that people would just collect peat and put it into their furnace and heat their homes that way. But it was a severe inversion in 1952.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of interesting to read that about. It's kind of the birth of the atmospheric sciences and things like that. So it's kind of fun. Our textbooks. I'm thinking the BJFP textbook, as you know, this one very sure the Finlayson Pitts and Pitts textbook, one of the Bibles of atmospheric science. The first chapter I think is all about London smog events and stuff like that. So it's kind of fun. So again, the book kind of goes into understanding how weather and other things like that, the conditions that they're walking around in can affect the data that they're going to be seeing. And I don't know, how long each teacher is going to have that, but amongst yourselves, you might be able to see how conditions are different throughout the school year, even if you're able to come back to get air beams again, or talk to your colleagues about what they saw in June versus what you saw in November might be really interesting.
So is there a meter inside the device that sees what the flow rate is? So that it adjusts like when you do per cubic meter? I mean, is there something that's...
So this isn't
how
just...
fast air is? Like when I put it in front of a fan out there, right, on the inlet, kind of slow air moving, slow flow, but then on the outlet, it's blowing pretty fast.
Yeah.
Does that make a difference in the reading?
It might. I don't know directly. Right now all we're doing is we're not really pulling anything through with the pump. It's just a little fan that's circulating the air through. So if you're adding more in there, more volume, it's potentially going to see more particles just by the sheer throughput. Throughput that's going
possibly
through.
in windy day you're getting different data just because the wind is blowing.
In terms, you're talking about the actual sensor itself could be producing
Would
something
be-
different on a windy day. Yeah, it's possible. It's not as well regulated as something that's got a pump on it. That's controlling the air intake that way. So I haven't. Yeah, I guess we haven't really thought too much about that kind of stuff or set it up in any way to test that. But that's totally that's possible. It might be something you might you could check also. Yeah. It kind of goes into the next session that we'll talk about, which is like how you actually design your study, what kind of factors you want to account for, how would you want to do it that way. I don't know if this is going to work. Nope. Okay, it didn't. So moving on, understanding wind. The sensor itself doesn't have a wind monitor on it, but there's plenty of other sites out there that can get wind information from as well. One of the things that we can do, and we've done in the past, this is when we did the study last year, is kind of understanding typical wind patterns. So you can go on and get these wind roses that exist, historical data exists for each of the different areas, and you can understand kind of where this is, if you take this as a 360-degree compass rose, it's telling you the wind directions where winds generally most come from for any particular area. So for a place like Oxnard here, westerly winds is going to be one of the most dominant wind patterns. But you get situations where you get winds coming off of the valleys, and I don't know what it's not really Santa Ana's here, but what's the
Santa Ana's.
equivalent?
Santa
It is
Ana's.
still the Santa Ana's here?
Yeah,
I didn't know if
this is the epicenter of Santa
coming
Ana's.
from this way.
Coming from the right to the left, basically.
Okay, yeah. So, that obviously affects all of the...
That map would have been different if you're doing morning versus, that's all day. If you did morning versus afternoon.
Yeah,
that's
this is going to be something that's probably a historical record of, a whole year's worth of... this is 5 years worth of wind data that went into making this. So it's a much longer record to understand the dominant wind directions. Any given day, it's going to change,
Or even
absolutely.
just generally time of day, so it's something we'd have to get.
Yeah, yeah,
Those onshore is in the afternoon.
right, exactly.
Is there such a thing as an iPhone app that would have wind
Yes.
reading on it?
Yeah, there's weather apps that exist. Weather Underground is probably one of the biggest ones. It's going to give you a lot of options.
Yeah.
Because Weather Underground is people's weather stations in their backyards and other locations
Well, I'm
like
thinking
that.
of just real time. Is there an
Yes,
app real time?
there is one that actually shows the arrows and force vectors.
That maybe,
Oh, okay, good.
I'll find it for you and send it out again. I don't think it's
Windy's the one that does that. Just
Windy.
like
There's
Windy,
another
that's
one
it,
that
we
you
got
can look up. different
Yeah, Windy.
parameters.
I've heard of Windy as well.
Oh, okay.
I usually do all my weather stuff from weather.gov. It's from the National Weather Service, and they have predictive maps on their time series of where which direction it's likely to come from and the strength the wind is going to be coming from. So luckily we have plenty of weather measurements out there. There's a ton of that stuff, so that helps give a lot of that context.